Hello. This is Antje from Byte Shuffle. Thank you for always watching our videos. This time, I've put together a summary on how to navigate the UB Reanimator matchup when playing Doomsday, along with some thoughts on sideboarding strategies. There's also a link to the pile breakdown video in the description, so feel free to check it out. Here is the deck list we will be using this time. I'll keep this hand because I can play Tamio, Inquisitive Student off an island, then on the next turn identify my opponent's archetype and use Ponder to dig for the cards I need. I'll counter it with Daze. I'm digging for Doomsday. I put Dark Ritual Doomsday Nihil Spellbomb on top and drew accordingly. My opponent cast Ponder, chose not to shuffle, and drew. I was planning to check their hand with discard before going for the combo, but it got taken. Since my opponent is fully tapped out, I'll take a shot at going off here. I'm going all in. From here. I thought it was almost certain to get countered, but luckily Doomsday resolved. At this point, I can't tell yet whether my opponent is on Reanimator or Tempo. If I deploy the Nihil Spellbomb in my hand, I should be safe from an immediate loss even if my opponent turns out to be on UB Reanimator. If I use the Dark Ritual in my hand along with the Clue token on the battlefield, I'll have to pass the turn. But it looks like I can safely set up Cavern of Souls and Thassa's Oracle. I've settled on the broad structure of the pile, so I'll fine-tune the details. If my dual land gets destroyed by the opponent's wasteland, I won't be able to use Nihil Spellbomb as a pile opener, and I'll also lose access to casting Dark Ritual. Therefore, by including Consider in the pile, I can hedge against situations where my land count falls short after the opponent uses wasteland. I build the pile. Thassa's Oracle, Cavern of Souls, Edge of Autumn, Consider. Looks like my opponent was one step ahead of me. If I had arranged the pile as Thassa's Oracle, Edge of Autumn, I might have had a chance. And that's where the run comes to an end. Before sideboarding, I'd like to review the list we used. First, the conclusion. I will explain it step by step. Since my opponent's deck relies on the graveyard, I don't think there's any debate about bringing in Surgical Extraction. Alright, let's go through the cards one by one. These are the cards from UB Reanimator that can impact Doomsday. First, there are the various counterspells, such as Daze, Force of Will, Consign to Memory, and Force of Negation. As well as their discard spell, Thoughtseize. I'll bring in Flusterstorm, Tamio, Inquisitive Student, and Duress. Flusterstorm isn't just a backup to force through my combo. But it can also counter the opponent's Entomb, making it a card that shines on both offense and defense. In exchange, I'll cut down on the number of Personal Tutor. That's because after sideboarding, both players bring in more disruption, which slows down the pace of the game. I'm also taking out Lion's Eye Diamond. That's because, unlike against UR Tempo, I find there are fewer situations where I need to combo off immediately after resolving Doomsday. Next is Orcish Bowmasters. If it's on the battlefield, it restricts my ability to draw cards. Because of that, I'm taking out Street Wraith. That's because with Orcish Bowmasters on the battlefield, it becomes the weakest cycler, and after cycling it, my opponent could reanimate it with one of their spells. Next is Tamio, Inquisitive Student. As I mentioned earlier, since the matchup often turns into both sides trading disruption, whether she sticks on the battlefield becomes a key factor. However, since my opponent runs Murktide Regent, they can easily break through my Tamio, and their deck is structurally better suited to take advantage of her. To counter this, my Nihil Spellbomb isn't just there to stop the opponent's combo. It's also worth remembering that if my opponent's graveyard gets large enough, I can use it to keep Murktide Regent in check. Since I don't have access to blue mana, this will end up being a 3-turn pass pile after Doomsday resolves, but because I can go all in on turn 1, I'll keep this hand. I'm going all in. From here, I'll increase the mana needed for the combo. Since I don't have any lands, I'll put a fetch land, an island, and a Cavern of Souls into the pile. I've got 2 Thoughtseize in hand, so I'll use them to slow down my opponent's combo or strip away a consign to memory. I build the pile, Island Thassa's Oracle Cavern of Souls fetchland. I use Thoughtseize to check whether my opponent already has their combo pieces in hand. I took out Entomb. My opponent cast Ponder and chose to shuffle. I name Wizard and win the game with Thassa's Oracle. For Game 3, I boarded out Daze and brought in a second Flusterstorm. I kept this hand a bit optimistically, thinking I might flip into Doomsday, but realistically, I should have mulliganed. My opponent cast Ponder, chose not to shuffle, and drew. Surveil's effect leaves it on top of the library. Since I kept my opening hand a bit too optimistically, I would normally want to put Flusterstorm into the graveyard here, but instead I decided to keep it on top and fully commit to a defensive plan. I hold up Flusterstorm to prepare for my opponent's Entomb. Surveil's effect sends it to the graveyard. I cracked the fetch land intending to grab a Surveil land, but then realized it was already in the graveyard. I'll use discard to check what's ahead. I took out Force of Negation. The opponent cast Ponder and chose not to shuffle. If Tamio, Inquisitive Student resolves, I'll lose on the spot, so even though I really don't want to counter here, I fire off Force of Will. I'll counter it with Flusterstorm. Surveil's effect sends it to the graveyard. I'll use discard to check what's ahead. I took out Force of Will. I'm going all in. From here, I'll increase the mana needed for the combo. My opponent has consigned to memory in their graveyard. By using Surgical Extraction, I should be able to break through both my opponent's offense and defense, so I'll include it in the pile. Just in case my opponent draws into multiple counterspells, I'll put Cavern of Souls in the pile as well. Since Cavern of Souls will likely be unnecessary after resolving Surgical Extraction, I'll include Consider instead so I can go off immediately afterward. To be safe, I'll double up on Thassa's Oracle. Here, I'll share some feedback from INF. This time I included Surgical Extraction in the pile, but INF pointed out that it might actually be safer to use discard instead, since that line carries fewer risks. The reasoning is that with my opponent's hand being just Daze and consigned to memory, it's unlikely they'll be able to assemble their reanimation package. They also noted that Murktide Regent is fairly likely to hit the battlefield quickly and become a real threat. On top of that, if my opponent casts Murktide Regent and exiles consigned to memory as part of the cost, there won't be a valid target for Surgical Extraction. That drawback makes discard the safer option, since it can reliably strip away the card. INF suggested building the pile like this: Cavern of Souls, Thassa's Oracle, Duress, Consider, or Ponder. I was advised that on the next turn, it would be better to draw into Duress with Consider, or Ponder, cast Duress, pass the turn, and then go off afterward. I build the pile. Thassa's Oracle Cavern of Souls. Consider surgical extraction. I cast surgical extraction, targeting the consigned to memory in the graveyard. That daze here turned out to be unnecessary. I win the game with Thassa's Oracle. Lastly, I have an announcement. I'm posting the concepts behind the images used in my videos, as well as small flavor-inspired stories, in the YouTube community section. If you're interested, be sure to check it out. Thank you for watching up to this point. I apologize for the many play mistakes. I hope to improve at MTG together with everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving it a thumbs up. See you next time. This is Antya.